All right, welcome back. So today we're going to tackle a pretty big idea, one that's been bubbling up for a while now. The argument is this: does modern Hollywood have a problem with heroes? Like a real problem? We're going to break down this viewpoint that says it's not just about creative choices anymore, it's actually becoming a failing business model. So let's just jump right into the deep end with the central claim we're looking at today. I mean, wow. It's a pretty bold statement, right? This really sets the tone for our whole discussion. The core idea here is that there's this deliberate push in entertainment to deconstruct heroism itself, and that's having a huge, huge impact on the stories we're all watching. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get into this whole war on heroes idea. Then we'll look at the money, the box office battle between all the doom and gloom stories and the more hopeful ones. After that, we'll spotlight a specific movie that's making a case for optimism, check out the pushback it got from the industry, and wrap up by looking at what might be a whole new generation of storytellers. All right, so let's get right to the heart of it. The argument we're exploring claims that, for years now, the big studios have been, systematically taking apart the iconic characters and franchises we all grew up with. Think about it. They're supposedly replacing these heroes we looked up to with versions that are flawed, broken, or just completely turned on their heads. And this right here, this is the core of that deconstruction thesis. I mean, you know these icons, right? The fedora, the lightsaber, the wand. The argument is that heroes like Indiana Jones and Luke Skywalker, their legacies have been kind of dragged through the mud. And it's not just them. The claim is that this thinking has even spread to huge foundational stories like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. The result? A world where it's just harder to find a straight-up traditional hero anymore. Okay, now this is where things get really interesting, because it brings in a key voice from outside of Hollywood, a futurist and engineer named Peter Diamandis. And his whole observation, which the source we're looking at highlights, is that basically every vision of the future we get from media now is just overwhelmingly negative. You know the drill: rogue AI, killer robots, and a future that, honestly, you wouldn't want to live in. So where does that leave us? Let's dig into the next part of this. If all the creative energy is going towards pessimism, you have to ask, is it even working? Is it profitable? The argument here is that audiences are just getting burned out on all the negativity, and you can actually start to see it in the box office numbers. Yeah, and this really lays out the two competing ideas perfectly, doesn't it? On the one hand, you've got this dystopian model. It's the one that often paints humanity as like a virus on the planet. But on the other hand, you have the aspirational model. Think about the original Star Trek, or even Walt Disney's original vision for Epcot. That was all about a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. A future that had problems, sure, but was absolutely worth fighting for. Really, it all boils down to one question. Is the future something to be afraid of, or something we should be trying to build? Okay, so if the theory is that audiences are starving for some optimism, where's the proof, right? Well, that brings us to the main exhibit, the key piece of evidence, a movie that, by all modern Hollywood logic, should never have been a massive hit. Let's talk about Project Hail Mary. The thinking in Hollywood forever has been that you need a big franchise, a sequel, a comic book, something people already know. But then along comes this movie. It's a standalone, totally original sci-fi film based on a book. It's exactly the kind of project that studios today would call way too risky. But just look at this number. $300 million worldwide in only 2 weeks. We're not talking about a minor success here. This is a monster hit. And the source we're looking at points to this as undeniable proof. Proof that there's a huge, untapped audience out there for the exact kind of movie Hollywood seems to have given up on. So the big question is, why did it blow up like this? Well, according to this analysis, it's pretty simple. The movie gave audiences everything they've been missing: a positive view of humanity actually working together, a real hero you could root for, a future that actually felt like it was worth saving. And that number, that 95% international hold in week 2, that is staggering. It suggests this isn't just a local thing. This message is hitting home all over the world. Now, a hit this big doesn't just happen quietly. It makes waves. It forces a conversation. And according to the source material, what it's really doing is pulling back the curtain on a deep creative fight that's going on inside the industry itself. And here's the real kicker. The people who made this huge hit, they were kind of treated like Hollywood outcasts. The directors, Lord and Miller, you might remember they were very publicly fired from a Star Wars movie. And the author of the book, Andy Weir, his ideas were apparently rejected by the people running modern Star Trek. So get this, the very people who created this massively successful, optimistic blockbuster were told they just weren't the right fit for the exact franchises that used to be the definition of optimistic storytelling. The irony is pretty thick there.
And Weir himself? Oh, he did not hold back. In an interview, he gave this, well, let's call it a blunt assessment of what he thinks about modern Star Trek, the same franchise that turned him down. It's a pretty clear shot fired, basically saying that franchise has totally lost its way.
But of course, that criticism was met with immediate pushback. Another author, Don Winslow, publicly told Weir he should apologize, saying it was unprofessional to attack other writers like that. And this whole back and forth, it just perfectly captures the tension, right? It's a clash between the creators who are defending the way things are and those who are finding huge success by doing something completely different. So all of this brings us to our final point. The argument goes like this. If the big established studios aren't going to make these kinds of aspirational stories anymore, well, someone else will. And it looks like a movement is starting, one that's not being led by studio execs, but by people in tech and futurists. The whole perspective here is that storytelling is just too important to be left to an industry that seems to have lost all faith in the future. People like Peter Diamandis are arguing that this isn't just about what's playing at the multiplex. This is a societal problem. And so, they're starting to do something about it themselves. And a perfect example of this is the Future Vision X Prize. Diamandis is literally putting millions of dollars on the table to encourage people to create the exact opposite of what he's seeing come out of Hollywood. The challenge is simple, really. Make a movie trailer, but it has to be for a movie that shows a future for humanity that's hopeful, compelling, and, abundant. And this really gets to the core philosophy behind this whole argument. The idea that stories are way more than just entertainment. They're kind of like the blueprints for our future. They shape what we think is even possible. And the logic is pretty powerful. How can you build a better world if you can't even imagine one anymore? So, we end on this big question. And look, whether you agree with this whole diagnosis or not, it definitely makes you think about the role stories play in our world. Are they just supposed to reflect a grim reality, or should they be inspiring us to build something better? As audiences keep voting with their wallets and new ways of creating stories pop up, the answer to that question, well, it might just define the next big chapter in entertainment.